Welcome to the Blue Gold Sports Podcast. I'm Roddy, joined by Tanner Mountz. And let me just say, it has been an interesting week for West Virginia football. But before we get into all that, just want to give a quick recap of the Iowa State game. You know, former number 11 ranked Iowa State pulls up to Morgantown, first ever Cold Rush game, and they just did what they needed to do. They left Morgantown with the 28-16 win. Tanner, what were your initial thoughts with the game?
Sorry, it was all right. It's tough because you want to put the crowd first, and you want to talk about the environment and the hype leading up to it. And the team came out and went up 7-0 on an impressive drive that took up over half of the first quarter, 7 minutes. I think it was like 14 plays, something like that. They went 75 yards. Incredible first drive. You get a stop on defense then as well. Then you're driving back down the field. Uh, Convert on a 3rd and 3 that gets overturned. Then you miss a field goal. You had an opportunity to go up 14 points and an opportunity to go up 10 points. And now you're only up 7. And then after that long touchdown pass, everything started to unravel. And from there, I mean, you can look at the box score and look and kind of say things like, oh well, West Virginia was in the game. It was still a one-score game in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes to go or something like that. But when you were in the stadium, if you were watching the game, if you were watching how it played out, you really knew that this game wasn't that close. West Virginia struggled to really get anything going. You've heard all week about the self-inflicted wounds and everything that West Virginia did and hurt themselves, the bad snaps, Garrett Green's turnovers, missed opportunities defensively. It's kind of been the story of the season for West Virginia so far, and you hear that again this week against Iowa State. But it really didn't feel that close when you were watching the game. It really, I don't know, you felt like West Virginia was kind of just surviving, I want to say. And you'd look at the scoreboard and you'd wonder how West Virginia's still only down 4 points. I mean, the defense played well in the second half. The offense did not. When the offense was playing well, the defense didn't play well. So, I mean, like Neal Brown talked upon it. I know he said some wild things in his press conference on Monday, but one of the things that he did mention was that, they just didn't play complementary football. And that's kind of what it felt like when one phase of the game was playing well, the other one wasn't. And it kind of just ruined all momentum, any kind of feel. And it never really felt like West Virginia was in the game.
And then you go back to certain plays in that game. The pass interference in the end zone, that was can be considered a controversial call, but you can't go back and change those things now. The outcome is the outcome. But just Garrett Green struggled a little bit in the game, obviously. It's two interceptions. He only had one passing touchdown, a little check down to Jaheim White in the red zone. But Brown swears that one of the interceptions was pass interference, and the other one was just a bad decision. So looking forward to this Kansas State game, I think Garrett Green's going to need to bounce back big here to win the fan base back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the last time that West Virginia played Kansas State was 2 seasons ago in Morgantown, and that was Garrett Green's first ever career start. He made the start over, I believe it was JT Daniels that season, who got benched the week before against Oklahoma, and Garrett Green came in and won that game. And it wasn't the worst game for West Virginia when you really look at it. They obviously didn't win the game at home, but they were able to score a lot of points. 48-31 was the final score. Green threw for 204 yards. Now, obviously, Kansas State, different roster, but you've heard all week that the coaching staff has been there. It's the same kind of football team that we've seen in years past. So for West Virginia, I mean, you got to take something about that. Maybe Garrett Green sees the uniform, starts feeling himself again because he did have that game. It was his first ever start. That was the first time that fans really seen Garrett Green throw the deep ball in that one. He looked really good. Like I said, 204 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions in it as well. And they had a rushing touchdown for 3 total. But I mean, maybe that's what Garrett Green needs, is to see a uniform that takes him back to when expectations were low. He was this young quarterback, this mobile quarterback that would explode for big plays. I mean, that's what West Virginia fans are used to seeing out of Garrett Green, and you just haven't seen it this season so far. So, I mean, maybe obviously this Kansas State team is better than they were 2 seasons ago, but it is still the same staff, and they run the same sort of things. It's going to be a lot of similar schemes, just with some better talent. And I mean, West Virginia, like you don't really have anywhere else to go but up from here, is what it feels like. And that's kind of crazy to say with a team that's 3-3, and their only three losses are to three undefeated teams. You just blew out Kansas State, big comeback win against Kansas. I know things haven't been great for West Virginia, but when you look at it on paper, there shouldn't be a team that feels like they've hit rock bottom. But yet here we are, 6 games into the season. It feels like West Virginia can't get any lower. Obviously, a loss here would make things a little bit worse for the Mountaineers, but would it really? I mean, like, how much worse could it really get for West Virginia? So, I mean, their backs are to the wall. Good things have happened when this team's been doubted all last season. They preached that 14 mono. Now expectations were a little high this season. Haven't lived up to them. Nobody expected them to beat Oklahoma State. They did just that. Everyone was then on the hype for Iowa State. They fall short. So now we're back to this bottom. Maybe that's what West Virginia needs. Maybe they need to be doubted. Maybe they need people to not be on their side and be critical of them and calling for Neal Brown's job, because we've seen it before when Neal Brown's gotten into this point. I mean, you could go back 2 seasons ago again against Baylor in Morgantown for a Thursday night kick where that might have been a game that saved Neal Brown's job after a disappointing season. He was able to pick up one of those three ranked wins that he has here in his West Virginia tenure. So maybe that's what it takes for West Virginia. Maybe all the kind of stars are realigning for what their winning formula is here. But it's going to be a tough one because Kansas State's super talented.
Yeah, just exactly what you said there. Kansas State's super talented team. They're not no blowover. Obviously, they have that one loss in conference play, but yeah, you can look at Neal Brown's record against ranked teams here. I believe it's 3-16. Like they're ranked for a reason, you know. Like I'm not making any excuses for Brown and staff in West Virginia as a whole, but those are going to be tough games. And if you could pick up a win like that over Kansas State, it's going to be huge for the season going forward. And you can arguably say that West Virginia has a potential to win out if they, with the momentum, if they beat Kansas State. But going past Iowa State, I just want to talk about the explosion of reaction, outrage due to Neal Brown's comments on Monday. So both of us were there, and he was asked to send like a message to the fans because, disappointed after a game that had so much hype and they just fell flat towards the end. So start off, I mean, his answers before that were really respectable in my opinion. He gave what he had, but and fans are going to argue, oh, he's been here for 6 years, been saying the same old thing. But then he asked fans basically, did you enjoy the game? Which kind of felt insulting to many fans. Some other fans thought it was blown out of proportion, but because you didn't see the whole answer. But he asked fans, did you enjoy it? He mentioned tailgating, he mentioned weather. I mean, it blew up. I mean, ESPN picked it up. I saw CBS Sports had an article. Barstool Sports wrote something. ESPN's Around the Horn talked about it. Pat Narduzzi just mocked him basically, but it's just, what do you make of his comments basically?
I mean, yeah, like you said, you and I were both there, and when you look at the first 10 seconds of that clip, like it is an atrocious answer from Neal Brown to say, I think the exact words that came out of his mouth were, I get that they want to win, but the question I asked them is, did they have a good time? And like, that's just not a good answer for a frustrated fan base, because having a good time is winning for a lot of fans, specifically Mountaineer fans. So I'm not gonna sit here and try to necessarily defend what Neal Brown said and said that it was an okay answer, and it was. I mean, it was a bad answer. Now, with that being said, I will play devil's advocate a little bit and kind of say it might be getting blown out of proportion a little bit, strictly because of how bad those first 10 seconds were. When you look at that clip, that was awful. But if you actually go and listen to everything that Neal Brown said, while it still wasn't great, it's not quite as bad, because he does defend the team and he does say there's a lot of West Virginia kids that are on this football team that are busting their butt every week and are out there trying to compete and get a win. That's another reason. Come support your local West Virginia kids. There's so many of them on the team. Half the rosters from West Virginia. He talked about, the team does want to win. Like they are working. Like obviously they're not out there to just put on a show. Like they are working to win. He brought up all those points. The one thing that I think that he had to say that he didn't say was that come support the team.
Yeah,
Like
I
we're
mean,
gonna win.
mhm.
He never once mentioned that they're going to win. And that's the goal for the week. He said that they're going to try. He said that there's going to be good weather. He said that it's going to have a good time. The tailgating's fun. It's a night game. They're going to put on a show, but never once did they say, we have a ranked team coming in. He did call for the support, saying, they're going to
Yeah.
need the environment, they're going to need the atmosphere, but never once was it we're going to show out this week. We're going to come out and we're going to play, and we got to turn our season around. And it was kind of everything but that answer. And while the first 10 seconds of that clip was absolutely an atrocious start to the response of that answer and led to a really bad answer in general, and I'm not trying to say is an okay answer. It is a bad answer. I think it has gotten completely blown out of proportion because when you go and you look at all the depths of it and everything else that was said, while it was still a bad answer and not Neal Brown's best, it looked like he was just done and fed up with the media. He just got done talking about how his family members are receiving backlash and the public of the team not being able to go in public and other coaches and their families seeing everything, the negative that's posted on social media. He's probably just done with the media at that point, did not answer the question well, but I don't think it was quite as bad as what social media is blowing it up to be. Still a bad answer. A lot of other things that could have been said that make that better, but I still think it's blown out of proportion just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're Neil Brown, do you call your shot? Do you say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna give it our best"? Because you haven't really shown that. I mean, you go back to Oklahoma State and Kansas. Sure, the Kansas game was a late comeback, and Oklahoma State, they just completely blew them out of the water. But those are two teams that are struggling in 2024 after having such high expectations. And how I kind of took the comments towards the end was like Neil Brown trying to entice people to come back because he said, "We need you there. Like, we need the fan support. We need a home field advantage." So he's like, hey, I mean, our tailgating's still good. Like, the weather's like, would a loss not feel like, all right, hear me out here. Would a loss not feel that much worse? Again, I'm not defending Neil Brown, but wouldn't a loss feel that much worse if you're sitting there in the soaking rain, it's cold out, and say West Virginia puts an alcohol ban? Like, he's just trying to get fans to come back. Like, he's trying to remind them, like, he, so it doesn't really make
Yeah,
sense, but like, you get what
I,
I'm
I,
saying?
I don't think there's a right answer for Neil Brown here because I mean, like kind of like what you're saying, he could have said, "We're going to win this week. Like we're going to win. That's why they should be there. Like we're going to come out," and fans would fire back on that because I mean, if he said like fans are getting tired of him responding the same old way with all the cliches of, our backs are to the wall. We're going to respond. We still are only have one loss in the conference. We're still competing for a conference championship. And he's said all those things in the past. That's what fans are calling for him. That's what they wish he would have said. But he's said all those things and they've still criticized him for it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I do kind of have to see that side of Neil Brown. That's like, it's kind of like he's wrong if he does, he's wrong if he doesn't.
Yeah.
He's kind of in that spot right now, but all that correlates to not being able to win. And that's what it comes down to. Fans aren't frustrated necessarily with his comments or, yeah, that's part of it. But none of this would be happening if Neil Brown's been able to pick up a big win. That's what fans are mainly upset about. And he has yet to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly there. He's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't. But I mean, but the fans, like, he said all those things. Like you said, he said all those things, and then they're like, "Oh, we've been hearing this for 6 years." Like say, like he'll be like, "All right, we're gonna look to bounce back." Like we're trying not to hang our heads. And I was surprised towards the end, towards the start actually, when he's like, "Usually I come in here and I tell you that I'm not, that I'm over the loss and we moved on." But he said he wasn't over it. So like maybe there's
Yeah.
a fire burning deep down in Neil Brown that's like this game could be like defining for his tenure at West Virginia. If he wins, I think I don't think the fans would be completely back on the trust to climb chain, but it'll be positive momentum for him. It'll be positive momentum for the season and program, obviously. But if he loses, I just can't see like you're not expected to win, but I just can't imagine good things coming out of a loss here, no matter
Yeah.
how.
I mean, there's no reason though that if West Virginia is not able to win this game, Neil Brown is finally able to pick up another top 25 win. You just got through the hardest part of your schedule, and you're still sitting at one Big 12 loss. I mean, like that's the reality of it. And then you have to go on the road to Arizona, and nobody's going to say that that's not a test. But if you're able to beat a Kansas State team, Arizona's struggling this year. You can build off that win. You get another big one on the road. Now you're looking at Cincinnati, Baylor, UCF as your next three games. Three very winnable games. I know Cincinnati is struggling or is out, playing better this season. Baylor and UCF are struggling though, but those are three winnable games. So now if you're able to pick up a huge Kansas State win, there's no reason that you can't believe that the team can go and win in Arizona. And now you're looking at the easiest part of your schedule with still one conference loss. So like this, there's no reason that if this game can still flip this season around for West Virginia, it doesn't feel like it with how everything has played out because everything has been so heartbreaking for West Virginia this season. You have all the hype around Penn State and you don't perform well at all. You struggle against your FCS team. You have a huge not a huge lead, but a 10-point lead with very little time to go in Pittsburgh, and you blow that one to your most hated rival, and that just feels like such a deflating loss. Yeah, you beat Kansas, but you didn't look good while you did it. It had to take a miracle comeback at the end. Everything has just felt off for this West Virginia team. But when you look at the reality of it in the new college football era, I mean, if you were sitting at 3-3 before, you'd be saying, yeah, there's no way that we make the college football playoffs. But now all you have to do is win your conference. And West Virginia is still sitting at only one conference loss, and they have the hardest team left on their schedule. They have it home this week in a primetime night atmosphere. So if West Virginia can finally get over the hump, if Neal Brown can finally get a win, why not? I mean, like, yeah, are fans going to be hesitant to jump back on? Absolutely. But then you pick up a win against Arizona, and the rest of your season is absolutely ahead of you because you just got through the 5 games. I mean, these were the 5 games that to start the season, everyone said if West Virginia could even just go 3-2 against these 5 opponents, they're going to have a good season. They're probably going to hit 8, 9 wins. If you're able to go 4-1 against Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Arizona, I know that they've not been having great years, but if you go back to the beginning of the season and you say, "Oh, this team's going to go 4-1 in that stretch," you'd be fully bought it. You'd be saying, "Yeah, this is a team that can go to Dallas and win the Big 12 conference and get into the college football playoffs." And Neal Brown has that opportunity if he's able to beat a Kansas State team, and he's got it lined up again. And I think that's what he was calling for. It's going to be a good time. It's a primetime atmosphere. They need it. He's not going to promise a win because it hasn't been working. He knows that they're struggling. He is still pissed off about the Iowa State game, but he's got the opportunity. He's got the opportunity.
Most definitely. I believe that West Virginia plays their best when people don't expect that much of them. Like Kansas, like going into the Kansas game, they're like kind of like weary, like, yeah, Kansas was already struggling, but West Virginia comes back, wins that game. And that's after the backyard brawl loss, which I would argue is the worst loss of the season and could possibly be because now Pitt's riding high. What are they, 6-0, 5-0, and
Yeah, 6-0.
6-0? And now you got Pat Narduzzi mocking Neal Brown. If West Virginia beats Pitt, I don't think Pat Narduzzi has any room to talk. But it's just like obviously it's not a conference game, but still, that's in your record that loss to Pitt, that late where you just couldn't hang on late. And so this Kansas State game, sorry, it will be a lot like we have talked about. Kansas State, they are excellent rushing the ball, equally as good as stopping the run. So we're going to need to see West Virginia air it out here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've said it on every single podcast so far this season. It's going to come down to Garrett Green's arm. And it did just that against Iowa State. The running game for West Virginia wasn't the best that we've ever seen it, but it also wasn't the worst. It wasn't the reason that the team lost. It's going to come down to Garrett Green's legs, or his arm, excuse me, because we know what he does with his legs. Can he throw the football? We haven't seen him do it yet this season. We saw him do it all last year, and it's really confusing when you break it down and look at it on where Garrett Green has gone. I mean, his deep ball hasn't even looked good this season. Nothing is clicking. And I think a lot of it's just teams daring him. Teams aren't giving him the looks that he's accustomed to, the looks that, you know, make him feel comfortable. He's not able to scramble as much because they're focusing on that. And that's when his confidence really starts to grow. It's going to come down to his arm. Can he make plays down the field? And can Neal Brown trust him to throw the ball down the field? I think that's also been part of the issue. I don't think Neal Brown has trusted Garrett Green fully this season. I thought it was interesting in the post game that he said that Garrett Green hasn't played poor enough to lose his job, but he did say, are there packages that Nico could be making an impact in the game? Yes. And then Chad Scott came on later and said, you know, they don't really make design runs for Garrett Green because of how much he has to scramble and they don't want him to take extra hits, but there's no reason that he flat out said we have some packages for Nico to come in and have some quarterback runs for Nico. So I expect to see Nico in the game. I expect to see a little bit of a mix, but it's still going to come down to airing the ball out for West Virginia because Kansas State's going to take the air out of the game, just like Iowa State did. Neal Brown talked. Each team only got about 8 or 9 possessions in the Iowa State game because of all the running the football, running of the clock. And Kansas State's going to do the same thing. DJ Giddens, 7.3 yards per carry on 108 attempts this season. He's been great. And Avery Johnson as well. Super mobile quarterback that West Virginia has struggled to stop at times this year. They've let quarterbacks get out of the pockets. They've let them scramble. Avery Johnson is super fast. So Kansas State is going to slow the game down. They're going to force West Virginia to slow the game down and run the football. And they're gonna load the box up to stop that. I mean that's what it's gonna be because they don't trust Garrett Green's arm. I don't know if anybody does. And until people see it, I don't see anything changing for this West Virginia offense in terms of the defenses that they're facing. They get a lot of man to man. They get a lot of just too high safeties and load the box up. And Garrett Green hasn't been able to do it. And a lot of it also falls on wide receivers. You don't have a lot of one-on-one win percentage or high win percent rates for the wide receivers. Neal Brown's not trusting Garrett Green. Garrett Green's just not making throws. He's making poor decisions. It's the passing game for the Mountaineers that has to be better if they want to be Kansas State.
Yeah, and I think it all starts with who Green can trust in the passing game. He's been looking a lot towards Hudson Clement this season. He's been looking a lot towards Traylon Ray, which carried on from last season when Ray was a true freshman, and Cole Taylor, who I believe is his roommate. You got to trust that guy, you know. But Cole Taylor is a huge passing target, but Jaden Bray, he's ruled out for this game. He's caught 2 passes this year for 44 yards. So when he returns, he could be the definite deep ball guy for Garrett Green. You know, he gets up there, he high points the ball, physical wide receiver. But Garrett Green has to do what he can with what he has right now. And I think you keep looking towards Hudson Clement. You know, he'll get those mid receptions, sometimes take him a lot of a lot of yards after catch. Traylon Ray goes deep sometimes, and then Cole Taylor, just the middle of the field, like the guy's 6'7", you know, that's a small forward in the NBA going up there and catching that ball. But and then you flip it to the defensive side. West Virginia's defensive front's been pretty good this year, but they need to be great against Kansas State because, like we said, Kansas State's excellent rushing team, and you need to contain Avery Johnson and get some pressure on him. So to wrap it up, just a very interesting week for West Virginia. A lot boiling here in Morgantown, and so Kansas State should be a fun one. For Ryan Roddy, Tanner Mountz, thanks for joining us.